Here we are, the beginning of the fourth week of Advent. All four candles are lit. And we will celebrate the fourth week of Advent for all about 5 hours. The way the calendar falls dictates the day of Christmas. We could make Christmas a movable feast day, so it better fit into our schedules. But the fourth week of Advent lasts merely a few hours. We accept it, we work with it, and so to speak, we cooperate with the calendar. When the angel Gabriel came to Mary, Mary was unsure of what to make of this news, that you will conceive a child, and he will be the Son of the Most High, and you will call him Jesus. Mary had no idea what God had in store for her. Even though she was not sure of what her future held or what the message of the angel really meant, she chose to cooperate with the will of God. She chose to cooperate with the will of God. And being that she chose to cooperate with the will of God, we celebrate the birth of our Savior Jesus on Christmas. For what Mary was able to do, she was open to the activity of God. Mary was not forced into motherhood. God asks her through the angel to be the mother of the Son of God. And Mary responds positively. She could have said no. She could have said no. But she cooperated with the will of God. For Mary and for us, following God is not simply blind obedience, but following the will of God is conforming our will to that of God. That our lives, that our direction might be conformed to the will of God. It is not just saying, well, God told me to do this, and therefore I will do it. It is being open to the will of God in our lives. Even if we're not sure of what we're being asked to do. And we do our best to discern what God is asking of us. So it's conformed, so there's not a conflict there's not a conflict in turning our will towards that of God. That might seem a little complicated or confusing. But what we want to try to do in our lives, always trying to do, is say, Lord, let me do your will. And when we say that, we say it not begrudgingly, but to say, Lord, help me follow what you ask of me. God does not force himself upon us. We give God, or we can give God permission to work with us. So to speak, God permission to cooperate with us. But God does not force himself upon us. But that we, once again, like Mary, might conform our will to that of God, so that they work in harmony. They work in tandem. There's not a friction or a resistance, but an openness to doing the will of God. And that's what Mary did. She had no idea what was being expected of her. And she was able to do this, to say yes, because of her ongoing relationship with God. And this ongoing relationship is for us also. We can perhaps reflect upon these 4 weeks of Advent, to reflect upon my growing closer in my relationship with God during this season of Advent. During this season of Advent, God is there for us and God speaks to us, that we might conform our will evermore to that of God's will for us. And to give God permission to move within us requires a leap of faith. It requires a trusting in God. It requires a step of faith. Because we do not know what God has in store for us. We cannot imagine or predict what will occur when we say yes to God, to cooperating with God. But we can trust that it is following Christ to the best of our ability. We don't know what we will encounter, but we do know that as we trust in God, we do our best to discern that will of God. And we seek the grace. We seek the grace of God to help us be accepting of God's will for us. In other words, we allow God to work within us, to conform us evermore to God's will. See how it all centers on God? Not ourselves, but it centers on God. And as it centers on God, we can conform our will and allow God to conform us to Himself evermore. And by ourselves, this is impossible. With the grace of God, all things are possible. And we, like Mary, can say, "Let it be done to me according to your word."